I'm going to explain 34th section of income tax management, which belongs to income from house property. Actually, it is the continuity of determination of annual value, building layout 1, and already relating to this, which is connected to this particular one. Already we have discussed in the previous session, in the 33rd session. So this is, since we have discussed this, just I'm going on, and up to here we discussed up to the format. Okay, and here in this session we need to discuss the MCQ, because all the remaining part whichever I just slided, that means so went through, it is there in the 33rd session, and we are going to discuss the MCQ. Income from house property is equal to net annual value minus 30% of net annual value, that is standard deduction under 24. Interest on borrowed capital, both A and B, none of the above. So answer is going to be, from the net annual value we can deduct, there are only two deductions available, that is 30% of annual value and interest on borrowed capital under section 24B. So answer is going to be both A and B. Okay, then to charge tax on income under head income from house property, income is charged on rent actually received by the owner, computed annual value, none of the above. So it's going to be the computed annual value. Sorry, it is rent actually received by the owner. Okay. If the municipal value is rupees 5 lakh, fair rent is 6 lakh, and standard rent is 5 lakh 50,000, the reasonable expected rent will be. So expected rent already we have discussed. Actually, we are going to compare municipal value and fair rental value, whichever is higher. So higher is going to be 6 lakh and the standard rent is 5 lakh 50,000. Here we are going to consider whichever is less. So 5 lakh 50,000 will be the expected rent. So it is expected rent, that is 5 lakh. So the answer is actually expected rent. Here municipal value and the fair rent is 6 lakh, whichever is higher is going to be 6 lakh, and the standard rent is 5 lakh 50,000. Here whichever is less we are going to consider, because the standard rent or the expected rent, okay, the expected rent cannot exceed the standard rent. Okay, whichever is higher will be expected rent, so it is going to be standard rent, that is whichever is less, 5 lakh 50,000. Okay, 5 lakh 50,000. So the reasonable expected rent will be this. The following statement is correct statement. Reasonable expected rent cannot be higher than the standard rent. Reasonable expected rent cannot be lower than the standard rent. Reasonable expected rent is equal to the standard rent. So of course, it reasonable expected rent cannot be higher than the standard rent. So that's why we take it as reasonable expected rent is going to be fair value or the municipal value. Okay, so that's why whichever is higher will be compared to standard rent. So that's why we are going to consider whichever is less. Okay, so answer is going to be reasonable expected rent cannot be higher than the standard rent. Gross annual will be actual rent received if it is more than reasonable expected rent. Actual rent received if it is less than the reasonable expected rent. So actual value we are going to consider the highest. Actual rent received if it is more than the reasonable expected rent. Okay, actual rent received if it is less than the reasonable expected rent. So answer is actual rent received if it is more than the reasonable expected rent. These are the reference books. Thanks for watching this video.